everyone, and welcome back to another video, another Photo Philosophy Friday topic. My name is Juan Londoño, for those of you that don't know me. For everybody else, welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is, do real photographers crop or not? Is that even a thing? Is that a question? Yes, it actually is. Even back in the day when I was shooting film, some people were completely against cropping. There were many ways you could crop. You could do it while you were exposing your pictures onto paper by moving the equipment around, or you can just make an enlargement and cut it. And that was a very simple way of cropping. But the point is still valid. There is a group of people on this side that absolutely hate cropping and say that when you crop, you are actually changing what you saw the day or the moment you shot that photograph. And then there's a group of people here that say, get over it. Get over it, move on, be flexible, and adapt. So the question is, first of all, which side are you on? And we're going to look at both sides and what makes sense. Now, if you by any chance just joined this video to hear my opinion, I don't know why that would matter, and you just want to hear what I have to say about this, my immediate answer is yes, real photographers crop. I'll give you my explanation for that in this video, and like I said, we'll talk about a little about why people think it's not a good idea to crop. But my opinion is that it's perfectly okay to crop. I've been cropping since I started shooting photographs, so to me, it's not even a question. But to many people, this is a burning issue. So to support my point of view that real photographers do crop, photographers have been cropping since the beginning of photography, right? You look at the big ones, and there are too many to mention. One that everybody's familiar because the calendars are all over the malls is Ansel Adams, right? Ansel Adams used to crop. And there's a reason for that. There are many reasons for that, because the weather changes and sometimes you don't want what's happening in the corner of your lens. People like Ansel Adams, had a great camera and may not have traveled with that many lenses, right? When Ansel Adams set up his picture, sometimes he waited 20, 30 days for the right lighting and for everything to be just perfect before he actually snapped it. Can you imagine setting up your camera and waiting for 20 or 30 days for the right picture? So when the right picture came, sometimes something was happening in the corner and he knew that he could get over that. Whether some bird was flying through there or whatever, he could get over that by cropping, right? So why not? Back then, it was much more difficult to crop. Cropping with film was just more complicated than it is going, on the computer, going and just, enlarging it and clipping wherever you want. Much easier. So I hate to burst your bubble, but for those of you that actually don't agree with cropping, just keep in mind that the camera doesn't see what the photographer sees. The camera sees what it sees. In other words, the camera doesn't capture what we see. The camera captures what it sees through its lens. A better way of saying that might be the camera captures where we see, not what we see. And like I just mentioned, it depends on the lens that you have, right? So if you have, for example, a telephoto lens on your camera, that is the same thing as cropping. See, you have a huge view in front of you, right? Say you're looking at some mountains, you're up at the top of a mountain and you're looking at this beautiful landscape, right? And you put a telephoto lens on, well, guess what you just did? You just cropped the image. But photographers didn't have a problem with that back then. They would switch lenses, and that wasn't cropping. Cropping was when you came back to the lab and you cropped there. And I don't really see the difference. I've always been pretty big on common sense and just not making a big deal out of little things, but when something doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. And that's one of those things that just never made sense to me. How is it okay to put a telephoto lens on a camera and crop your field of view, but it's a bad thing to crop it on paper or crop it on the computer? You see what I'm saying? And back to the camera not really capturing what we see, it's really capturing what it sees with its lens. Cropping shouldn't matter anymore, because that's the whole basis of for these photographers, that when we crop, we are changing what the camera sees. The camera, we're changing what we see. That's their point, right? When we crop, we're changing what we're seeing. Well, we're not really seeing, the camera's seeing, because every time you put a different lens on it, it sees something different. It doesn't see what we see. So if the point is that by cropping we're changing what we see, well, that's a moot point in this case, because we don't actually see. The camera is doing all the capturing depending on its lens. Right now, I want to talk about something really important, and it's water break. So for those of you that know, this is water break time. There's always one of these in the video. Please pause your video. I'm going to take my water break right now. One of them anyway, and we will proceed. So I hope you're with me so far, right? We've just talked about people who hate, photographers who hate cropping because they think you're altering the original image, and we just talked about how that's not really the case because the camera's doing its own thing. It's not really capturing what we see, right? Adding to that argument a little bit, we as photographers don't really see what's in front of us, if you want to really get down to it. We see what we want to see, and we do that by carrying different lenses and different cameras around. I'm sorry that I don't have some lenses to hold up and show you, but you know, a big telephoto lens is very different from a little pancake lens, you know, a little prime pancake lens, right? Like a you know, 22 millimeter 2.0 that's flat and small, and then you put a huge 400 millimeter, it's going to capture two different things. So, you know, two photographers standing on a cliff are going to see the same thing, but once they pull out their cameras, one has that prime 20 millimeter lens, 22 millimeter, and the other one has that 400 millimeter lens, guess what? They're no longer going to capture the same thing, right? I think we can agree to that. So why would it be wrong if the photographer with the 22 millimeter lens goes home and crops their image on a computer and they end up with the same image that the photographer shooting the 400 millimeter lens has, right? Now, when I say same image, the pixels are going to be off, because you're going to crop. So if you're cropping from a 22 millimeter to a 400, woo, that's going to give you some pixelation, unless you have a really high resolution camera and the photographer with the 400 millimeter lens had a crappy camera, and that happens. But you know, we're not talking about pixelation or anything like that. We're talking about just size, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? The photographer that took the 22 millimeter lens may have lost his lens, his telephoto lens, or her telephoto lens. It may have gotten damaged. They may not even own one. So in that case, that's how people get over that stuff. They shoot something a little wider, they get home on the computer, and they crop it. It's like putting a telephoto lens on your camera. Now, I'm a little limited because I see with one eye, but if I had both eyes, I would see 180 degrees almost. I know this hand is like over here on the side, and this one's going to be over here if I could see. So that's almost 180 degrees, right? There is no camera that I know of, no lens that can see 180 degrees without distorting the edges. The human eye is amazing in that sense, right? And I know camera companies, lens manufacturers are trying really hard to do something like that, but it hasn't happened yet. We have the fisheye lens, which captures maybe even more than 180 degrees, but it distorts everything, you know, ridiculously. And you go to something like on a regular full frame camera, you go down to like a 10 millimeter lens, you're already distorting everything at the edges. I mean, that's really bad, right? So in that case, a camera is not really seeing what the photographer sees anyway. When I get out on a cliff, I'm seeing edge to edge of my peripheral view, assuming I have both eyes. You put a lens on a camera, you're already cropping. You're already cropping. Even with a 35 millimeter or a 24 millimeter, which is pretty wide, you're already cropping. So to those photographers that think cropping is a no-no, cropping is taboo, cropping is bad, you are cropping. Especially if you're walking around with a 50 millimeter lens, because that's a standard lens. It's supposedly kind of like the size of the things that the eye sees. Oh, you're really cropping, because you take that camera off your face and you have a huge field of view. I see a dog walking across the street, or I see a pink cab in New York City, and I see everything around that cab. When I put my camera up to my face, if it's a 50 millimeter, even a 35 millimeter, I just cut down my field of view significantly. I just cropped the entire image. So my point here is to say that we all crop. We're always cropping. And the more telephoto or zoom we put on our, on our camera, the more cropping we're doing. At the end of the day, cropping is cropping, no matter how you look at it. Cropping with a lens, cropping by cutting a picture that you've already printed, cropping on the computer, cropping on film equipment when you're developing your film. It doesn't matter, it's cropping. So to say that one way of cropping is wrong, like putting your pictures on a computer and cropping them is wrong, but it's okay for me to slap a telephoto lens on my camera and go take some pictures, it's not right. We can't do that. That's kind of like a double standard. It all comes down to having more options, right? I mean, we all love options, right? Wouldn't it be great if we had tons of options for everything that we were going to do? When you walk into the store, 20 different colors of the pant that really fits as well, so we can pick 2 or 3, or the shirt that fits is really cool, or the hat that fits is really cool, whatever, right? Cars, that's why car manufacturers give you multiple colors that you can pick from, and interiors, right? Henry Ford used to say, back in the day of the Model T, you can have any color you like as long as it's black, because that was the easiest thing to do on a production line. He hadn't figured out yet how to crank out, a car a day, whatever it was, with different colors. That would have complicated everything. So you can choose any color you want as long as it's black. If we have the option of getting, of purchasing 10 different colors of a car, why would we ever say, no, Ford, I don't want that, take it back. The next year, just give me white cars, or give me black cars. I don't need, no, nobody would ever do that, right? The fact that you have those options is great, and more options might be even better. Now, there is such a thing as, option overload, right? And then you can't make a decision. And people are aware of that. Manufacturers are aware of that. They don't want to give you too many options. But what I'm talking about here is very simple. If we have the way of cropping images with a lens, if we have a way of cropping them on the computer, if we can print an image and then just cut it down and put it, say we print an 11 by 14 and we decided we only want a little piece of it and we cut it out and we put it into an 8 by 10 frame, that's cropping. That's wonderful. I love having options. I wish I had another 2 or 3 ways of cropping. Actually, if you can think of a couple more, put them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And I know all about simplicity. I know all about minimalism. It's all important. I get it. I really do. But that's not the case here. We're not talking about that here. If we were talking about simplicity or minimalism in photography, that would be, for example, me being a street photographer and going out with 3 or 4 lenses, so I have options, right? Options are fantastic, but that's not minimalism. That's not simplicity. A street photographer that wants to keep it light and wants to be discreet, doesn't want everybody noticing that they're capturing images of people walking around. You're going to walk around with a small camera, relatively small, not this big DSLR, and you're going to walk around with a really small lens, like that lens I just told you about, right? Like a 22 millimeter 2.0, or Fuji's got a 23 millimeter 2.0. Everybody's got a small, discreet little lens that doesn't make a lot of noise. It doesn't stand out and intimidate people, right? So I understand simplicity and minimalism, right? That's where you call it out, right? A photographer goes out to do some street photography and has a backpack with 3 or 4 lenses. No, that's not simplicity. That's not minimalism. You go out into the street, you got your little camera around your waist, around your neck, and you could put it around the waist, but that's not going to be very comfortable. And then you take some pictures discreetly, and you do whatever you can with that lens. And guess what? You get home, and if you need to zoom in a little, you crop. That's simplicity. That's minimalism. You go out with as least equipment as you have, and you get the job done. And to me, it's more satisfying when I look at an amazing picture that I took, and I say to myself, I went out and I shot in New York City for an entire day with one freaking lens, a 50 millimeter 1.8, not even a lens to die for. And I got 3 or 4 breathtaking images. That makes me feel better than going into the city with a backpack full of lenses and cameras and getting home super tired. And yeah, I got the same 2 or 3 really good images, but I didn't need all that, right? One of the last points I want to make is that if you're shooting photography for customers, not just for hobbies, then guess what? Our customers are going to decide if cropping is right or not. For example, I go to the local gardens here and I take a picture of some lilies in the middle of the pond, right? And I shoot them with my telephoto lens. And I bring them up close so that they fill the frame. When I put those on the wall of an exhibit and a potential customer walks by and is talking to me and says, these look beautiful. They would look really nice on my bathroom, but paper would get damaged. And I tell them, oh, you can print on aluminum, you can print on glass. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Let's do that, right? They don't know if I was on a boat right next to the flowers with a regular lens, or if I was on the other side of the planet with a telephoto lens, right at the edge of the lake or the pond, shooting with a telephoto lens, or if I cropped those images. If I was at the end of the pond, standing up, shot those images in the middle of the pond, and still needed to crop in the camera because my telephoto lens, I only have a 70 to 200. Even if I put a 2-time teleconverter, it may not get me close enough. So they don't know, and guess what? They don't freaking care. They want that picture on the wall. They don't know if you cropped or not. And if they ask you if you cropped it or not, then they're one of those photographers that don't like cropping that needs to watch this video. But the truth is, they're not going to do that. They're going to love the image, and they may ask you how you took it, because some people have asked me that. They're into photography, and I'll tell them I was across, the other side of the pond. I had a telephoto lens. Didn't get me in as close as I needed, so I took the best picture I could, and then I went home and I cropped it in a little, and you know what they say? They go, wow, really cool. I like that, and I'll buy it. Right? And that's it. It's over. Your customer will decide if cropping is okay or not some other photographer that doesn't know you that's writing an article on why cropping is bad. Doesn't matter. And I like to end the video with that thought in mind, is basically that other photographers don't get to choose what's right for us, right? So keep that in mind. If you read an article that, where a photographer explains why cropping is disgusting, it's okay. That photographer is entitled to that point of view. And you know what? That photographer is not going to crop. And his photography is probably still going to be pretty cool. And they're going to sell their photography, and it is what it is, right? But don't let that affect you, because if you want to crop, it's perfectly fine as well. If that photographer is not cropping, I'll tell you what, my opinion is that they're limiting themselves, right? That's like me going out and saying, I'm not going to shoot any telephoto shots, because that's cropping. I mean, I'm seeing from here to here, so I'm going to put the widest lens on my camera that I can get without, with minimal distortion, and I'm just going to shoot like that all day long, because that's what my eye sees, and anything else is cropping. I can do that, and you know what? I want to get some cool pictures, but not every picture is going to be cool. Not every picture is going to be useful. A group of small group of people standing in front of me having an argument, for example, for some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a revolt, but when people have like protests and stuff like that, right? And you get 3 or 4 people, and I'm shooting a wide thing that's getting buildings and cars and all kinds of telephone poles, and you're losing the attention of the people. They're going to look like they're a mile away from you, right? So those wide shots aren't going to work. And if these photographers are talking about cropping is bad, then that's what they need to do. They need to put really wide angle lenses on their cameras and shoot everything that way, because that's the only way you can mimic the eye, right? That's the truth. So we have reached the end. I'm sorry if this sounded like a rant and a rave, but I was just trying to make a point. And my point to all my friend photographers, my fellow YouTubers and my YouTube family is, don't be intimidated by what other people are thinking or saying. If you enjoy cropping, if it makes you happy, if your pictures look better, if you get more out of your pictures, if you have more flexibility, if it keeps you from buying lenses that you may not need because you don't use them often, then cropping is fantastic. Continue to do it. Continue to do it right. That's the important thing. Continue to do it right, with good composition, and just continue cranking out awesome images. And I leave you with that. So please like the video, subscribe, and please comment if you have anything to say about this. I know there are going to be some haters, and I'm ready for that. But don't hate me. This is my opinion. That's all it is my opinion, right? Everybody's got an opinion. You know what they say about opinions. If you don't, maybe you want to look that up. Should I tell you? They say opinions are like, how do I say this nicely? Buttholes? Because everybody's got one. That's what they say. I didn't invent that quote, so I apologize. But opinions are like buttholes. Everybody's got one, right? So just be careful who you listen to. If you find yourself a good mentor, then by all means appreciate what they have to say. But take everything with a grain of salt, because at the end of the day, it's your photography, it's your happiness, and if you're selling, then it's your clients that are happy. no one else's. Until the next video, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your time. I love you guys. Stay healthy, drink your water, and we will catch up in the next video. Ciao for now.